Good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us. The show is African Touch, and here are the latest news headlines from across the continent of Africa and beyond. We'll start with these newspapers from Kenya. The Standard newspaper called Massacre. Questions abound after more than 70 bodies of occult victims were dug up in graves on land said to belong to Pastor Paul Mackenzie. Is there a recruiting agency? Why didn't the intelligence community smell a rat in spite of too many telltale signs? Did local police look the other way as gullible faithful were lured to their deaths? Is it time to regulate religious activities? That story is on page 3, 4, 5, and 6 inside the Standard newspaper. Governors to Ruto pay in 14 days or we close down. And then Russia mercenaries in Sudan. The story is on page 27, and I think I'll be touching on that in the news bulletin. We move over to the Daily Nation. The main headline: Shakahola horror, deaths jump to 73. Police exhumed another 26 bodies from multiple graves in Pastor Paul Mackenzie's Shakahola's village farm in Kilifi yesterday, taking the toll to 65. And with 8 other church members who had been rescued succumbing in hospital. But the search for bodies is not yet over. Amid reports, controversial pastor had warned of consequences. The story is on page 2, 3, 4, and 5. And governors issue 14-day notice over cash crisis. The Star newspaper: how Mackenzie won hearts of villagers, followers, and residents mingled freely for 3 years, but this changed at start of 40-day fast that you'll find on page 6 and 7. And floods wreak havoc in Mandera, and Kisumu displace 2,000 people, and Mombasa reports 10 children deaths. The People Daily: the man who preached death, Paul Mackenzie, a father of 17. How many wives did he have? He's a father of 17, has had a checkered personal history, and now 47 bodies had been dug up in his private property in one of Kenya's most macabre sagas. And then AU picks Uhuru for Ethiopia peace talks. Remember, Ethiopia agreed to have another round of talks with OLA. I think that was announced on Sunday. And former President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, will also be part of that mediation team. Remember, he was also part of the leaders of the other mediation team that was able to broker a peace deal between the government of Ethiopia and the TPLF. But this time round, it is between the government of Ethiopia and the Oromo Liberation Army. And these talks, I think, will be happening in Tanzania. All right, the Business Daily: debt payments surpass state running expenses. Okay. Taifa Leo, that is our leading Kiswahili newspaper. Shakahola, serikali yazindua usingizini. Yazinduka. I think the government has been wakened from its slumber, because how can this many people have died? And these have gone on for a while without even the local authorities having suspected anything. And the last we checked, Kenyan intelligence is really good. So the fact that what I'm wearing today, that's a huge red flag to the people of Nigeria. If he has to keep coming out and, telling you guys that he is okay and there's nothing to worry about, well, we know immediately after the elections were over, he had a trip planned to Europe. And he said he was going to rest. There were some rumors that he's not in the best of health, and he's been going to seek for medical attention, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think from the experience Nigerians had with former president, well, he's still the president, Muhammadu Buhari, who's always out of the country for these medical trips abroad, or retreat, or whatever it is that they try to call it. And because of that, he was hampered so much, and sometimes he did not get to participate at his optimum because of the health issues that he was having. So I think those are the same concerns that perhaps Nigerians are having with the incoming President-elect Tinubu. So now he is from France. Why is he coming from France? In as part of a month, he's been out of the country. Since the elections happened, I think in less than 2 months, he's been out of the country. He's gone to now 3 countries in Europe to do what? The first time they said he was going to get some rest because, the electioneering period was very tedious and, he needed to rest. You wonder, can people not have enough rest in Nigeria? What is really going on? So I think and the fact that he has to keep defending this and reminding us that he is okay, the opposite might be true, but I'm just saying. And he added that I have rested, refreshed, ready for tasks ahead. If you needed to rest and if you needed to be refreshed, I think Nigeria has wonderful places. Their incoming head of state can go to rest and can go to be refreshed. And if this is what you shall be doing, spending taxpayers' money to be going out to France to be refreshed and to rest, then that will be problematic for me if I was a citizen in Nigeria. That will be problematic, that every time you feel like you needed to rest or you needed to be refreshed, you'll be flying out of the country. I know they all do, but this for me is this kind of a red flag, the kind of red I'm having on today, bright red. Okay, 3 killed as Gbaji Hausa youths clash in Abuja. Abducted Kogi monarch dies in kidnappers' den. All right, there's some sad news. Again, court dashes Nigeria airs hope of flying. All right, so let's move on to this day also from Nigeria. Tinubu, disregard rumors about my health. I'm refreshed and ready for task ahead. Nigerians are glad to see you back and fit, says Barau. APC to suspend Amaechi's ex-chief of staff, others over anti-party activities. And 2022 financial year, 5 big banks stand firm despite economic headwinds. And then let me see the news day as well. This is from Zimbabwe. ED contaminating churches. That is what Chamisa is saying. Okay. The Daily News from also Zimbabwe. Loud yes and nays to seal CCC polls as many areas fail to reach consensus on candidates. All systems go for ZITF. The Sowetan from South Africa. My escape from crazy Sudan war. Very well. Pretoria News as well from South Africa. Diarrhea, pneumonia kill almost 20,000 kids. And the Daily Monitor from Uganda. Congolese police take over Ugandan villages. All right, I'd like to know more about that. Now, Congolese officers are backing their nationals who have crossed into Uganda and are now laying claim to 3 villages in the frontier town of Padia, West Nile sub-region, setting the stage for a possible diplomatic incident. This is something else. Now, over 900 schools in Kampala don't have licenses. Over 900 schools don't have licenses. So how do they do the national exams, or who gave them who allowed them to run these schools? 900 schools. Okay. Let me see what else we have on the Daily Monitor. Kenya cult death toll rises to 73. And then questions as last suspect in Kirumira killing cleared. The New Times from Rwanda. Private sector trade unions upbeat about new tax reforms, and microsurgery in Rwanda could lower amputation cases. That is according to a plastic surgeon. The Citizen from Tanzania, Ali Karume, why the union was unavoidable. The veteran politician and diplomat says there were several factors that led to the 2 countries uniting, including the fact that they had much in common. I think that is the union between Tanzania and Tanganyika, and is it Zanzibar? Berlin appoints minister with the Tanzanian roots, and Ruto vows action after 58 cult bodies found. That is our president over here. All right, so let's look at some other newspapers. From the U.S. today, no time for runaways. Abortion still front and center for justices. And Biden versus Trump both face hurdles. That is on the U.S. today. The Washington Post, out of enthusiasm and options. And Carlson fired by Fox News. Kyiv held off Russia attacks at U.S. behest, and concern rises as Russians plot against U.S. ally Chad. Okay, another proxy war, I guess, in the making there. The Guardian, U.S. edition, EPA accused of failing to regulate use of toxic herbicides despite court orders, and an opinion piece there by Robert Rich. Trump committed treason and will try again. He must be barred from running. The New York Post, Jolly Rogers jets finally land QB Aaron and switches no for Namath, I guess. And then the UK, Daily Record, Scott's mom trapped and terrified in Sudan. The Independent, British doctor shot as UK troops land in Sudan to spearhead rescue mission, and 2 warships on their way as up to 4,000 Brits trapped by fierce fighting. Stranded Brits, that is the News. Stranded Brits faced 3-day drive in Sudan war zone to reach Royal Navy ships. And the Times, we've got no plan, what Boris said after Brexit vote. I can't believe that, actually. Raise against time to save 4,000 trapped in Sudan and give us more NHS patient data, pleads drug company boss. And boys will learn respect for women under Labour. Okay. Boys should learn respect for women from home, not under Labour Party. I don't think that is even a political thing. But I digress. The Metro, get them out. Nightmare in Sudan for 4,000 Brits. The Daily Express, a pledge from our Prime Minister to hearten Britain's women. Okay, the Daily Telegraph, Xi prepares biggest military build-up in history. That is Xi Jinping, the president of China. Britain and EU vow to protect wind farms from Putin, and COVID inquiry demands all WhatsApp texts. All right, and the Daily Mail, business blast Rishi's own goal over tourist tax, and farewell to land the strictly perfect 10. And I think that is what we have in some of those newspapers. So let's look at some weather conditions before we get into the bulletin, rather our news conversation this morning. Johannesburg, the weather situation today is going to be partly cloudy with highs of 24 degrees Celsius and lows of 14 degrees Celsius. In Nairobi, highs of 23 degrees Celsius and lows of 17 degrees Celsius. It's going to be isolated thunderstorms across Kenya's capital. And in Accra, highs of 32 degrees Celsius and lows of 26 degrees Celsius, partly cloudy there. And in Dakar, 24 degrees Celsius on the high side and 20 degrees Celsius on the lower side. It's going to be mostly sunny. In Dakar and in Abuja, Nigeria, mostly sunny today with highs of 37 degrees Celsius and lows of 25 degrees Celsius. It's really going to be very sunny there in Abuja today. And in Kinshasa, highs of 32 degrees Celsius and lows of 23 degrees Celsius. And it's mostly cloudy today there in Kinshasa. And in Luanda, mostly cloudy with highs of 29 degrees Celsius and lows of 24 degrees Celsius. And in Khartoum, also partly cloudy, but temperatures are high at 43 degrees Celsius and lows of 23 degrees Celsius. And in Addis Ababa, scattered thunderstorms with highs of 21 degrees Celsius and lows of 13 degrees Celsius. And that is your weather update for today. So now I think it will be a good time for us to get into our conversation this morning, and I'd like to bring us up to date with the latest from Sudan. Sudan is waking up to a 72-hour ceasefire which took effect at midnight on Monday. It is at least the third suspension of fighting since violence erupted this month, but the others did not hold. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said an agreement had been reached between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces after 48 hours of negotiations. At least 400 people have been killed since fighting erupted on 15th of April. Both sides in the conflict independently announced their involvement in the ceasefire. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has warned the violence in Sudan risks causing a catastrophic conflagration that could engulf the whole region and beyond. Since the violence began, residents of the battle-scarred capital Khartoum have been told to stay inside, and food and water supplies have been running low. Bombing has hit key infrastructure like water pipes, meaning that some people have been forced to drink from the River Nile. There will be hopes the ceasefire will allow citizens to leave the city. Foreign governments will also hope it will allow for continued evacuations out of the country. Countries have scrambled to evacuate their diplomats and civilians as fighting raged in central, densely populated parts of the capital. Earlier on Monday, Mr. Blinken said that some convoys trying to move people out had encountered robbery and looting. The U.S., he added, was looking at potential resuming its diplomatic presence in Sudan, but he described the condition there as very, very challenging. Sudan is suffering an internet blackout with connectivity at 2% of ordinary levels, monitoring group NetBlock said on Monday. In Khartoum, the internet has been down since Sunday night. It is estimated that tens of thousands of people, including Sudanese citizens and those from neighboring countries, have fled because of the unrest. All right, and much anticipated signing of the... We'll come back to that story. Let me take us through the rest of the stories, and then we'll come back to the Sudan story. We head over to Uganda, and the much anticipated signing of the anti-homosexuality bill passed last month by Uganda's parliament did not come to pass after President Yoweri Museveni announced he would send it back. While meeting legislators, Museveni said the bill did not include clauses of amnesty, especially for people who could have been lured into the act and want to denounce them to seek rehabilitation. Okay. Now the president, who first praised the legislators for rejecting pressure from imperialists, said his main concern was rehabilitating the psychologically disoriented people. The president told the legislators to make corrections, promising to meet the Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament, the sponsor of the bill, Asuman Basalirwa, and other stakeholders. The president had been informed by the Attorney General Kiwanuka Kirowa that the bill criminalizes even those who voluntarily come out and seek amnesty. Overwhelmingly supported by legislators, religious leaders, and the general public, the bill proposed harsh punishment for offenders, including a death sentence, life imprisonment, or a 10-year jail term for those found guilty of crimes ranging from engagement in homosexuality, aggravated defilement of offenders, recruitment of children into the act, and operating brothels, rooms, or houses promoting homosexualities. Okay, so however, the bill was seen as a display of discontent with the European Union Parliament, which passed a resolution against development of the East African crude oil pipeline. The resolution said the pipeline would affect many people through displacement and generate 34 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year. The bill had attracted a widespread condemnation from the UN and the US and Europe. So let me just understand what is going on, because President Museveni was to sign this bill into a law over the weekend, but he seems to have, I don't want to say chickened out. Okay, he seems, because I'm really trying to understand what the information from Uganda. And part of this bill criminalizes, of course, the engagement in homosexuality, aggravated defilement of offenders, recruitment of children, and brothels operating and roofs or houses promoting homosexualities. So I guess other kinds of brothels are okay. I'm just trying to understand. The only brothels that the Ugandan government has a problem with are the ones that are promoting homosexuality. But any other brothel I think it's fine. I don't know. I'm trying to understand this this bill. And so President Museveni did not pass it. According to President Museveni, he believes that homosexuality is, I think, is a mental health thing. And so according to him, these individuals can be rehabilitated so that whatever it is going on, or whatever it is he thinks is wrong with their head, can be corrected through rehabilitation. So apparently now, according to this bill, there are parts of this bill that perhaps did not allow for those people who are willing to go and seek rehabilitation to get some amnesty. So while meeting legislators, Museveni said the bill did not include clauses of amnesty, especially for people who could have been lured into the acts and want to denounce them to seek rehabilitation. The president, who first praised the legislators for rejecting pressure from imperialists, said his main concern was rehabilitating this physiologically disoriented people. According to Museveni, these are people who are mentally ill. According to him, that is the only reason anybody will be attracted to homosexuality. Now, the president told the legislators to make corrections, promising to meet the Legal Affairs Committee and see that maybe a clause that allows for amnesty. If anybody comes out and seeks for amnesty and perhaps agrees to go to these rehabilitations, then they will be forgiven, and they might not get the penalty that this bill seeks to put into law. It's anyway. Let's see what will happen there in Uganda. I'll just leave that there, and we move right ahead to, before we get on to Sudan, there's a news item I read this yesterday, but I've gone through it here right now. So I want us to, continue. I'm not even done yet. Let's head back to Sudan. And the Russian mercenary outfit Wagner has been present in Sudan for years, but has kept a low profile during a recent clashes to preserve its interest in the gold-rich country. Experts are now saying here is what Russia supplied weapons to Sudan during the 3-decade-long rule of former President Omar al-Bashir. So Russia has been a close ally to Sudan since the days of former President Omar al-Bashir, and that mostly is because of the sanctions that had been heaped on Sudan by the Western powers. And so countries like Russia, China had a healthy diplomatic relations with Sudan, and they filled that gap created by the absence of these other Western powers there in Sudan. And so Russia had been supplying Omar al-Bashir with weapons, and then especially after the UN imposed sanctions on the country in 2005 over the Darfur conflict. So Russia still continued supplying Sudan with weapons even after the US imposed sanctions on the country in 2005. Never mind the fact that Russia is one of those countries that sits at the United Nations Security Council. It is a permanent member that passed on this resolution imposing sanctions on Sudan in 2005. But Russia, again, a member of the United Nations Security Council, a permanent member, still went against that resolution and was supplying arms to Sudan anyway. Sometimes you wonder, do we even need this United Nations really? Do we need it in the world? Is it able to do its function? If you're having a member of the United Nations Security Council violating these things that have been agreed upon at the United Nations, right now, the same Russia, look at what it's doing in Ukraine. It is violating the tenets of the United Nations. And now the rest of us are supposed to adhere to some of these resolutions and the agreements that have been made at the United Nations. It becomes very tricky, for the rest of us, but I guess the rest of us must respect these resolutions, must respect these treaties, must respect whatever it is that comes from the United Nations. But these other countries at the top, they just choose and pick in which form or shape they would wish to apply or respect or implement some of these things from the United Nations. And so Russia, I've said, has been supplying Sudan with arms, even those days that Omar al-Bashir was in power, even after the sanctions by the United Nations. After Sudan's army toppled him in 2019, following months of protest, ties between Khartoum and Moscow appeared to slacken. But after Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan seized power in October 2021, his deputy Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo signaled openness to continue this operation. So there's, I think, some information that is very important in addition to what I just shared with you, that I would like to add in regards to this Russian mercenary group and the and that relationship between Russia and let me see if I can get that. I had it part of the research I did yesterday. I got to learn some very interesting information about this now that has to do with Libya and Russia. Okay, the Libyan warlord Khalifa Haftar, who is also being accused of his side supporting the RSF, helped to prepare the Rapid Support Forces, a militia now fighting for control of Sudan. So they've been working in tandem with Khalifa Haftar. Remember, if you've been following the activities since the army came to power, you'll realize that Hamdan, that is the leader of RSF, had been working very closely with Russia. A few times he made diplomatic visits to Russia. And we always questioned what was really going on. And also, Khalifa Haftar, very close. They have a very close working relations with Russia as well, and Egypt in that regard. Now, Libya warlord Khalifa Haftar helped to prepare the Rapid Support Forces, a militia now fighting for control of Sudan, for battle in the months before the devastating violence that broke out on the 15th of April. The Observer has been told by former officials, militia commanders and sources in Sudan and the UK. The involvement of Haftar, who runs much of the eastern part of Libya, raised fears of a long drawn-out conflict in Sudan, fueled by outside interest, like we have been saying here, as much as there are other internal factors that are ongoing and the power jostling. But a lot of this now, we are coming to learn, has so much to do with external interference and external interest and external actors. And this is being described as a nightmare scenario of multiple regional actors and powers fighting a proxy war in the country of more than 45 million people. Haftar's connection to Hemedi, that is the leader Hamdan, the leader of RSF, goes back to well before the fall of Omar al-Bashir's Sudan's veteran authoritarian ruler. After months of popular protests in 2019, however, the relationship has grown warmer in recent years. So they did have a relationship even before the falling of Omar al-Bashir, this Hemedi and Haftar. And with Hemedi sending mercenaries to Libya to fight alongside Haftar's military force, these mercenaries are the RSF. I've said here several times over that the RSF, the former Janjaweed, they are a mercenary group for hire. So they've been used in the wars in Libya, they've been used in the wars in Yemen, and they've been used in the wars in, I think, Syria and other countries. With Hemedi sending mercenaries, that is the RSF, to Libya to fight alongside Haftar's military force, the self-styled Libyan National Army, that is also led by Haftar. Hemedi and Haftar have also collaborated on a range of highly profitable smuggling operations with middle-ranking commanders in both militias forging close ties as they manage the transit of valuable illicit cargoes between the two countries, experts told who were doing this story. So now, Hemedi is in control of key gold sites in Sudan. And the military, the other side of the military as well. You know, during the reign of Omar al-Bashir, the military was in full control of the country's economy and key sectors in Sudan. I think that has been one of the arguments have been making because of how much interest and the involvement in Sudan, outside of just providing the country with security, it will be extremely difficult for the army to give way for a civilian rule. And now when you look at all these things, it's making a lot of sense. And Sudan and Libya see it as tried major routes for human trafficking, narcotics, and much less. So these military leaders in Sudan and the one in Libya, Haftar, that is also fighting the UN-backed government, they've been working, and Sudan and Libya has been a great transit for narcotics and for human trafficking and other illicit activities. And in recent weeks, as conflict between the RSF and Burhan's forces loomed, Haftar made efforts to support Hemedi. Last week, I was here, and remember me asking Haftar if he thinks the conflict in Sudan was a joke for them, because he had offered to mediate between what is happening in Sudan. He had offered. He'd come out quickly and said, we are being accused that we are supporting a side in the Sudan war. That is not the truth. Matter of fact, we're not taking any sides. We're not supporting any side in this conflict. And we are willing to offer ourselves as the mediator. And I thought, how dare you? With the kinds of chaos and instability that your efforts have caused in Libya, what is unraveling in Sudan? Is that a joke to you? I think that was the question that I posed. But now you can see there's a possibility that they are at the heart of the matter, alongside other issues that have fueled this conflict in Sudan. And in recent weeks, as conflict between the RSF and Burhan's forces loomed, Haftar made efforts to support Hemedi. That is according to reliable sources. And they have been carefully calibrated, however, as neither Haftar nor his international sponsors, that is the United Arab Emirates and Russia, the ones who are supporting Haftar in Libya, want to commit entirely to one side in conflict, whose likely outcome remains unclear. Haftar must also be careful not to alienate supporters in Egypt, because you also have the backing of Egyptian President al-Sisi, who is backing, and Egypt is backing al-Burhan. Did you see how this proxy war is? Do you see how Sudanese are suffering for something that has even nothing to do with them? Do you see the web of these proxy wars and international actors? And only days before the conflict erupted, Haftar ordered the arrest of a deputy of Musa Hilal, a Sudanese militia commander who is a bitter enemy of Hemedi. Haftar in Libya ordered. Okay, the arrest of a Sudanese militia commander who is in Sudan, the illegitimate leader in Libya ordering the arrest of one in Sudan. Okay, and in a further display of support, one of Haftar's sons flew into Khartoum to donate $2 million to Al Merreikh Club, one of two big football teams in Sudan, which is struggling financially. Now, if that is not money laundering, I don't know what that is. So the Haftar's son, the renegade in Libya, traveled all the way to Sudan and donated $2 million to Al Merreikh Club. Okay, the club is associated with Hemedi. Hemedi now even has a football club that he supports. Is associated with Hemedi, who has helped to repair its stadium. After announcing the gift, Sadiq Haftar was hosted by Hemedi. You see, a day after Haftar's son had left Sudan, Hemedi moved forces to take control of international airport at Merowe. When I think was it on 12th or 11th there, when I was bringing you this news, because the war broke out on the 15th. And I remember bringing this news here over this, what was developing and the tension that was beginning to build up. So that happened immediately after son left Sudan, after he had brought that donation of $2 million to support that Al Merreikh football club. After he left, Hemedi moved forces to take control of the international airport of Merowe, a strategically sited town 300 kilometers off Khartoum, and began positioning fighters to seize key locations in the capital. And that is where the army started citing alarm, saying The RSF are moving to key locations and they're taking up positions, and that was not with the consultation of the National Army. So the National Army raised a red flag, and they saw this as an act of aggression and a provocation. And that was just like 2 days before the eruption of this war on the 15th. And the Wall Street Journal last week reported that Haftar had sent at least one shipment of arms to Hemeti, a claim denied by the LNA. I think that is the point, that the LNA, that is the military wing that is being led by Haftar in Libya. I think that is the point that Haftar came out and offered his team, or his, I don't know what to call him, but his army, I guess, because he has an army, to be part of the mediators, to broker, to start a mediation process. And CNN described flights from LNA-run air bases organized by the Wagner group. So they're working with the Wagner group, which has a presence in both Sudan, in both Libya and Sudan. Okay, so I think that is a very important piece of information that we need to have in mind, even as we look at this unraveling conflict in Sudan. So that's why I needed to bring that up, and that is because now the Wagner is trying to keep a low profile, despite the fact that they have been very active in Sudan. They have been very active in Sudan, and their interest is in the gold-rich areas in Sudan, which is controlled by Hemeti and other military leaders in Sudan. So that is the reason why they are there. All right, let's move on to other news items. This time we go to Burundi. Burundi Foreign Minister Albert Shingiro on Monday met with Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud in Mogadishu to discuss security cooperation with the future of the African Union peacekeeping forces in focus. Officially, Villa Somalia said Mr. Shingiro was delivering a message from Burundian President Evariste Ndayishimiye. The message, the Somali presidency said, was to underline Burundi's appreciation of Somalia's peace and stability and its importance for the region, that is the East African region and the world. Mr. Ndayishimiye is currently the chair of the East African Community, EAC, and his country is also among the troop contributing countries, TCC, to the African Union Transitional Mission in Somalia, ATMIS, which has until December 2024 to exit the country and hand over duties to Somali security forces. Somalia's application to join the EAC is currently under review, and it could become the 8th member of the bloc by the time ATMIS exits Somalia next year. And speaking about ATMIS, with less than 20 months before the African Union transition mission in Somalia formally exits the stage, officials in Mogadishu say they are willing to prolong the stay of the regional force, signaling the challenge of beating down Al-Shabaab. Now, the East African newspaper has learned that Mogadishu has launched a shuttle diplomacy to lobby the international community and influential leaders in the region to agree to the extension, a move likely to bring in consequences ranging from sustainability and mandate of the mission. The African Union Peace and Security Council is expected to convene on April 27th to discuss the future of the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia, ATMIS, following repeated calls and signals that Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud wants the force to stay beyond its December 31st, 2024 exit date. The initial plan was for the drawdown to begin in June and to be completed by December next year. But a source close to the peacekeeping mission told the East African the proposal to extend the tenure of ATMIS has been mooted, but there is nothing concrete yet, as the idea is still in the corridors of the federal government of Somalia leaders and some other stakeholders that Mogadishu has reached out to. Uganda's People Defense Forces spokesperson Brigadier General Felix Kulayinje said he supports the Somali president's efforts to lobby for a longer stay for the force that has been deployed in the deadly conflict for the last 15 years, battling Al-Shabaab militants. The proposal, which seeks to keep ATMIS in Somalia for at least another 2 years, is consistent The exit plan that was initially floated by nearly all the troop contributing countries, TCCs, in the late 2021, when the force was being configured to its current mandate of the transition mission from the African Union mission in Somalia, which was AMISOM. Now, the DCC's proposed 5-year transition period, during which institutions of the federal government of Somalia would gradually take up all the security functions, but the United Nations Security Council and the European Union agreed to a total of 32 months, counting from April 2022. The plan favored by the TCCs was to exit in 2026, but this was subject to endorsement by international community partners with the financial muscle, like the EU, the United Kingdom, and the United Nations, who fund the mission, in which they have so far sunk an upwards of $3 billion since the beginning of that mission in 2007. Now, ponder about that. $3 billion so far has been used to support. Initially, it was AMISOM. Now, the mandate was renewed to ATMIS. Okay. But they more or less are doing the same thing, except now for ATMIS, it was supposed to prepare the security forces and the people responsible for different institutions in Somalia to start taking over slowly as they draw down on the forces. And just to make sure by the time they leave the country, which was meant to be 2024 December, then Somalia would be in the hands of its people, in the hands of its security forces, and in the hands of its own leadership. And ATMIS would happily end its mandate and its mission in Somalia. But as things have been playing out, as much as there has been some effort, and we've seen a bit of gains being made as far as fighting Al-Shabaab is concerned, I think also there's still so much to be done. You would argue, I think it makes sense for ATMIS to continue extending its mission with another, 2 years, and just allow it time to do a proper transition and allow for transition and help and mediate and, this transition, so that when they leave, Somalia can be left to the hands of Somalis to take care of it. But when you look at everything else that have been happening in Somalia, as much as there are some hopes and there is some changes and there is some gains that have been made so far, but there's still so much that still needs to be done. That is on one hand. But on the other hand, these peacekeeping missions or peace-building missions, they're different. I think the ATMIS are peace-building and peacekeeping and whatever else they're doing in the fight against Al-Shabaab and helping the government of Somalia stabilize that country. These missions have become also a source of entrepreneurship illegally, because a war or a conflict is very lucrative. That is an industry that has become very, very lucrative. These peace missions, this conflict you see that are spread out across the world. As the rest of us are trying to pray and hope for peace, and are worried about the safety of men and women and children who get stuck in the crosshairs of the conflicting actors. But there are some people somewhere seated and strategizing and happy, because as these conflicts continue, they're smiling right to their bank accounts because they're making a kill from this conflict. And so you find that there are some missions that honestly you can sit and review and check and see how long have they been in this country. The mission in Somalia, AMISOM, before it transited to ATMIS, what were they able really to achieve? What was the strategy what can they boast of that they were able to do within that period that really could be counted as a success? And these $3 billion that have been sunk into this mission, you can say, you know what, it was worth it, because we can see this success and these efforts that have been made, they can match that prize. But little, to be honest, little. It is just now. And I know for the team that is coming from these other contributing countries, Kenya included, Uganda, Burundi, with the other leadership of former President Mohamed Farmajo, I think it was a bit dicey, if I may just use that word, because it got to a point, even the government of Somalia at that time, under that leadership, was not really open and perhaps seen as supportive to this mission. So if you don't have the goodwill of the receiving country, so you are limited in terms of how much really you can achieve when it comes to achieving your mandate as a mission. You need the goodwill of that country for things to work out. If there is a government, then you need the goodwill of the government and you need the goodwill of the people. And we've seen some of the forces became a target. And we've seen there's a time Kenya lost a huge number of its troops. And from the intelligence information we were receiving, the forces from Ethiopia, also a contributing country, and others allegedly, had known of this impending attack by Al-Shabaab, but they had chosen to not give a heads up. And we've seen Kenyan planes, I think 2 or 3 times, being shot at by other countries that are also contributing. There are, troops in this country. So when you see these other wars and when you see how things have been playing out, you wonder, what are we here to bring stability and peace in Somalia, or are we here to flex our muscles and to bring our other issues that we have between our countries at play here in Somalia, or are we here to extend this mission as long as we can because we are benefiting, or what is really going on? And these are questions that have been lingering, and I think these are questions that people need to have and needs to ask, even as this ATMIS seeks to extend its stay. Is it still necessary for it to be in Sudan? One would argue, perhaps yes, because as much as a bit has been done, well, a good number of success has been achieved, especially under the new administration. But there's still a lot that needs to be done, and indeed, Somalia still needs all the support it can get from the rest of the stakeholders. But that can be successful if there is a goodwill and support from the government, which it seems to be supporting. The new administration seems to be in support of that. And I think after the meeting with the Burundian president, Evariste Ndayishimiye, I think yesterday, who was there, because he is the current chair of the East African community. And Somalia has applied to be included in the East African community several times, I think twice or so. And the EAC has been a bit reluctant. I mean, there are some certain things they have to look at before they admit you in this bloc. But what I found to be interesting, because some of the things that they are saying, the other member states perhaps are using as reasons to delay the admission of Somalia into the bloc, about the instability, about all these things. I think that was the same thing that was happening in the DRC, but we admitted the DRC anyway, didn't we not? DRC has been unstable. As much as it seems to have a strong central government, but DRC has been unstable. DRC is stable right now, even when they were ratifying and signing that, the treaty to join the EAC. DRC was still under, an active conflict. Was it not? But the rest of the other members did not have a problem admitting the DRC, did not stagger that process for the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they were in a hurry to admit the DRC, and in essence they picked up that conflict that now the EAC has to be involved with which is nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you cannot admit Somalia because of its instability, because of the conflict that is ongoing, but you admit a DRC in the middle of an active conflict, then it just speaks on the double standards. You know, it just speaks on the double standards. I don't know if having Somalia in the bloc will mean, I don't know what that will mean. I think in terms of that will be another conflict that we will inherit, but in terms of other things, and you know Somalia, because of the conflict and everything else that has been going on, it is very fertile with opportunities and things. And that's why I think the stability of Somalia is really, really paramount. And once it is stable, there's so much to do there. There's so much industries to build. There's so much mining to do. There's so much infrastructure to build. Like there's so much, because they'll be building not really from scratch, but almost. So there'll be a lot of opportunities in that country for everybody else. So everyone is just linked to find a position in Somalia, so that when it finally stabilizes, then everybody else can go in for a kill. And that is the most unfortunate part. So are we going to inherit all these other things that perhaps the package that Somalia is likely to bring while it joins the EAC? But, we allowed the DRC to come with its baggage. Okay. And now we are dealing with it. And that's fine. So Somalia is still waiting to see if it will be included, if it will be allowed to join the EAC. Its application is still pending. Now, the proposal by ATMIS, let's go back to ATMIS. The proposal, which seeks to keep ATMIS in Somalia for at least another 2 years, is consistent with the exit plan that was initially floated by nearly all the troop contributing countries in late 2021, when the force was being reconfigured to its current mandate of a transition mission from the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM. The TCCs proposed a 5-year transitional period, as I have said there earlier. And on this, the EU alone has given a total support of $2.74 billion in supporting the contributing countries in this mission. EU has given $2.74 billion for both ATMIS and its predecessor, the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, to cover allowances for troops from Uganda, Kenya, Burundi, Ethiopia, Djibouti. And as I say that, the Ugandan soldiers have not received their pay since 2018. But the EU has given the money. So last month, Ugandan President Museveni told his Somalia counterpart Sheikh Mahmoud to prioritize peace by building a people's national army. Trust Museveni to advise you to build a people's national army, like NRM. I don't know what he means by building a people's national army with the correct ideology of defending their country for peace to prevail. Okay, I agree, President Museveni, you're right. Now, this was during a meeting at State House in Tebe on March 19th, when the Somali president was in Uganda to witness the passing out of 2,900 trainees for the Somali National Army, who successfully concluded their 4-month special basic military training. Okay, let me pedal back a little bit. So, 2,900 trainees for the Somali National Army, who successfully concluded their 4-month special basic military training at the Special Mission Training Center in Butiaba, Bulisa district. That was in Uganda. So they were training in Uganda. The relationship between Somalia and Uganda is really quite interesting. And the last time we were talking about this training thing, I think Uganda was also training the Somalia Electoral Commission officials on how to carry out, how to conduct an election. Yes. Uganda was training Somalia. But Uganda has a very strong army, so them training the Somali National Army, I think that is, we've seen that happen. Countries normally do that. The military diplomacy normally happens. So it's no big deal, I guess. So that's good. So 2,900 trainees were passed out, and so I think they'll join the rest of the forces in Somalia. This, Sheikh Mahmoud said, is a part of the transition efforts for Somalia to train and recruit at least 24,000 soldiers by December 2024 to take over from ATMIS, which is currently sharing security duties with the Somali National Army while completely ceding controls of others to the local military and the police personnel. Okay, so I love this part of the news because we can see that Somalia is not just sitting there waiting for this transition to happen. You can see there are actually actions and parts of this that the government is actively implementing to ensure that this transition, by the time the country feels it's ready for this ATMIS to leave, then the country will be ready. And this you see by having it train more of its men and women. I don't know if women are there, but more of its citizens to come and take up the security position, so that when ATMIS leaves, there will be no vacuum left and they'll be able to take over. So I think this is a great thing for Somalia, and these kinds of effort, and I think that Uganda helped. I think it's very important, and every other stakeholder, I think, should be coming in and helping Somalia in its transition. In this transitional period, and see that Somalia has everything it has, even outside of just fighting Al-Shabaab, but also is better prepared to take over the affairs of its country. And I think this is a great thing. But other stakeholders led by the EU have recently voiced concerns that not enough is being done by the international community to complete Somalia's transition, which includes building the security forces, which includes training and equipping of the military and police personnel. So they still need a lot of that. And the EU is saying, hey, we are carrying part of our baggage. Can you also come in and help? So they are calling on, I guess, countries like the US and the UK and other partners to come in and help in as far as just helping with the transition. And besides security, other reforms that need the support of donors and deliver a full transition include state building efforts that involves participation in the National Consultative Council in May, which will deliberate on an electoral model, expand political participation to move away from the ad hoc decision-making forum. So I think they still have a long way to go as far as these reforms are concerned. But I think so far, so good. And I think with these reforms and these implementations of these very important aspects of this transition, I think it will, we can see that there's an actual commitment. And so I think it's just calling upon the rest of the stakeholders to support these efforts that are being made, and this will that we've seen being exhibited by this new administration in Somalia, and just support it. Anyway, before I go, let me just bring us up to date with the latest from Sudan. A plane carrying the first batch of Kenyan evacuees from Sudan landed at the airport in Nairobi on Monday night. The dozens of evacuees disembarked from a Kenya Air Force plane and were received by Defense Secretary Aden Duale. More evacuations are underway, with the Foreign Ministry on Monday stating that 3 evacuations programs were active as fighting continues in Sudan. A stream of European, Mid East, African and Asian military aircraft flew into Khartoum all day Sunday and Monday to extract foreign nationals who are moving past combatants at the city's tense front lines. Flight carrying 39 evacuees from Kyoto, Sudan lands in Nairobi as part of the evacuation effort. So we can see that some Kenyans have been brought back home, and other countries also are working to have their nationals leave Sudan safely. Let me see what else I can just inform us on before I end the show. But I think I started by telling you that the warring sides have agreed for to a 72-hour ceasefire starting midnight last night. And so we don't know, this is like the 4th time they're attempting to have these ceasefires, but every time it has been violated by both sides. So I don't know if this new ceasefire will hold. And this was announced by U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who said the 72-hour truce has been agreed between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces after the 48 hours of negotiations. At least 400 people have been killed in the hostilities so far. So I think this ceasefire will allow for safe movements of people, and of course the foreigners who've been also in Sudan, and for the Sudanese themselves who have been stuck in their homes since this war broke over a week ago. Remember, this conflict is in its second week there. It broke out on the 15th of April, and leading to that we had seen tensions upon tensions just building up. And I'd even talked about before this whole thing, blew out, and I said that would have been the great time or opportunity for IGAD or for somebody else to just fly into Sudan and try to find out what was going on and try to bring things in order. But as you've seen, this story has been developing, and now a lot of information is coming out, and we're seeing other factors and interest now coming to the fore, and it is indeed a very, very complicated conflict, but we shall continue keeping you up to date. Thank you so much for your time this morning. My name is Miriam Agoto. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.